Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is our first webinar for 2024, and we are going to talk about advancing home energy labeling in Canadian communities. Kevin Bean, who is our operational director, is going to lead the presentation. But before that, I wanted to start with land acknowledgement. Oops. We are based in Toronto, and we want to acknowledge that the land on which we operate is the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. As part of our land acknowledgement, as you may know as of now, is that we're trying to learn something new and hear stories from Indigenous peoples about Indigenous peoples. So I'm going to share a short video where Zawange Webb is it's the producer of the video, and the text is from Jimmy Carr.
The meaning of life. I'll do it in 5 words. Okay. Enjoying the passage of time. That's it. It's enjoying the passage of time. The chances of us being here now are so small. The chances of this happening are incalculable, and yet we're here and we have this shot and we're breathing and we're healthy and this is incredible. Enjoying the passage of time is about all I got, and it's enough.
I hope you had time during the vacations to reflect on that, and then we'll be reminded more often this year to take a breath and enjoy the current time. Very quickly, a plug-in to our 2 tools that can help you a lot in your work. The Climate Policy Database tracks climate-related policies across CAC. And if you want to look into implementation projects, then the tool that you need is the Climate Action Atlas. I will share a link to the 2 tools shortly in the chat. And lastly, our upcoming events. This Friday at 11:30, we are going to talk about applying equity lens in the rental retrofit market and renewables installation. And on January 24th, SSG is going to present their GHG calculator for municipal projects. The best way to be updated with what's coming up from CAB is to be subscribed to our newsletter, and I will share a link to that as well in the chat shortly. But for now, I'm going to give the word to Kevin.
Oh, thanks, Desi. It's a bit weird there watching Jimmy Carr be serious. It's like when Leslie Nielsen or someone tries to do a serious role in something. I'm like, is he about to say something shocking? But who knew he was capable of it? Anyway, thanks very much for joining us all. So I'm just going to talk about a report that we completed 2 years ago. I think 2 years ago this fall in 2022 on home energy labeling. Basically, the work was funded by the Trottier Foundation up in Montreal, and we proposed a sort of a 5-phase approach where in the initial 2 phases, the Trottier funded phases would be the desktop research phase, and that will be followed up with phases 3, 4, and 5, which we haven't yet got into for reasons we'll talk about on this call, I suppose, where we actually were hoping to pilot a home energy labeling project with an Ontario municipalities. We've not yet advanced that part, but we're not giving up on it. If you can just go to the next slide, please, Desi, you'll see that the project phases that we covered in phase 1 and 2, we undertook a landscape review. We looked at the benefits of home energy labeling, the barriers, the key actors. The focus was primarily on the residential sector, not as much on the single-family home residential sector, not as much on MURBs. And then we undertook a fairly comprehensive survey across Canada to understand the consumer preference for home energy labeling. And then in the second phase, so sections 4 and 5 of that toolkit, we look at some program design considerations for jurisdictions considering creating energy labeling program for the municipality, or a broader jurisdiction than a municipality. And we also created a milestone framework to help guide anyone through the creation of such a program. Next slide, please, Desi. So, you know, again, the research is a year and a half-ish old now, and there wasn't tons to draw on. There are a number of different jurisdictions that mandate energy labeling at the time of lease or sale. The ones we covered included the Australian Capital Territory, so the Canberra region in Australia. The entire European Union is covered by this legislation, and then it was municipally specific after that. So we looked at a few in Austin, Texas, Portland, Oregon. No idea what Burr is. There were no mandatory programs in Canada then. There still are not mandatory programs, but there are voluntary programs in Canada. And so we'll talk about some of them in a second. Next slide, please, Desi. And so, yeah, that's just a map showing us showing the same thing. Okay, so I'm just going to look at, this was from the toolkit, and in the toolkit, if there's a link to it, if you have a look through it, we get into them in quite a bit of detail, the different programs, how they work, how one applies to them, and so on. So this is the Portland, an example of the Portland one. And for each example, I try to show you an example of what the homeowner would receive in terms of the energy score, and also a real estate listing, which shows you what, you know, people who are out looking for homes would see. So Portland is not, in that example, they're not prescriptive around how an energy label is advertised. It can be just mentioned in the text of a property listing. It's not front and center. And because it's not front and center, it's not database searchable within the listings service. So it's hard for you to screen it out. So if you were, you know, looking for a place to rent or to buy in Ontario, when you went to realtor.ca, here's a bunch of different criteria. You can tick boxes, you can screen out certain places. You can't do that for energy listings in the Portland case. But nonetheless, it just shows you, for example, in the label there, you'll see it uses a score of 1 to 10, pretty common. This one comes up with estimated energy costs per year. Some do that, some don't. Some just give you an energy intensity, as well as details on the home, you know, year built, floor area, that sort of stuff. It also provides the carbon footprint at the bottom. But then in the actual property listing, for this one, it's just in the text down the bottom there, has a very rare 10 rating for the home energy score. Absolute must see. So yeah, that's not an ideal perhaps way to display it because it's a little bit buried in the text and tends to get lost, I think, with the reader. If you go to the next slide, Desi. So this is the Australian Capital Territory, so the Canberra region. And again, on the left, they use a star rating and a point score. So for any home in this system, I think it's out of 8 stars, which was a little strange, and a point score that sort of relates to that star rating. I think the maximum point score was 32, if I recall, but I could be wrong on that. So again, it doesn't give you as much information as the Portland example did. Tells you who the assessor was, gives you the score. It doesn't really get into your energy costs, your GHG costs, that sort of stuff. But on the home listing, they do have to display it in the property features section there. So if you look down on the actual listing detail of this particular home, you'll see in the bottom left there, it says energy efficiency rating medium 4.5. By the way, the label on the left doesn't relate to the listing on the right. They're just separate examples. So again, that's what other ways, other jurisdictions, we're just going through these to show you what these can look like, these labels. If you go to the next slide, please, Desi. This is a standard one from within the European Union. The particular one is an Irish example there. And so they use this BER, building energy rating system, standardized across the whole of the EU. So wherever you are in the EU, they're making you fall into this system. So if I'm looking at a property listing in Paris, or in this case in Kildare, if you look at the listing details on the right, up the top there where it says BERC2, they look like that all over Europe. There's the same graphic, you know where to look for them in the same place. And it does create a nice sense of harmony in terms of understanding. And it also gets around the issue of media bleed, because, you know, a lot of people on the move all over Europe and a lot of transients. And so you know that from place to place, this will look the same. And it's also, you know, the bulk of the housing stock you'll come across is falling into those C and D sort of ratings, right? You know, and these change over time to increase the desire towards efficiency. And just, you know, anecdotally, may have told some of you this before, but, you know, I am Irish, and my family in Ireland are all obsessed with their building energy ratings. Like, everyone's obsessed with their building energy ratings, yet they are not obsessed with environmental activism or climate change. Honestly, some of my siblings do not care one bit. They just equate this to quality, to reduced cost, to something that increases the value of their home at the time of sale. And this is heavily supported by government, right? You know, there's government programs to help you up your rating as you move, when you get into a house and so on. But just suffice to say that they don't put climate change or environment or greenhouse gases front and center in this program, even though that is a key driver behind the program. Their comms people have decided that just we'll put it out there, and the market will actually drive the desire to get people up into those A-listed building energy ratings. So yeah, next slide there, please, Desi. And then we'll just look quickly at some of the voluntary programs in Canada. Obviously, we're all pretty familiar with the Energuide system, which now uses a gigajoules per year rating. So we're trying to get down to zero, which of course would be the best energy performance available. There's over 200,000 labels have been issued. Some of those, though, quite a long time ago. It tends to come in spurts reflecting different, typically federally funded programs or utility funded programs and their availability. So I'm going to imagine in the greener homes phase we're in right now, we're seeing one of those large growth spurts in Energuide ratings, or in the creation of Energuide audits. But anyway, within the Energuide label, it's a more data intensive label than many of the other ones are. It's obviously a rigorous, well-tested program. Every label has the, you know, label date, the energy performance of the home, the energy performance of a typical home, and then, you know, the optimal energy performance. It also, within the label, breaks down where the energy is being consumed, looks at the different energy sources for that particular home, and then provides your energy intensity, as well as a QR code to get more information on it. So there's lots of information packed into an Energuide label. If you just pop onto the next slide for us, please, Desi. And then there's a couple of voluntary systems to allow people to display their Energuide labels, because the Energuide labels themselves, or the detail captured in your Energuide label, rather, not the label itself. The labels themselves aren't public when they're issued. So RateOurHome.ca was a Metro Vancouver system. So we know in Vancouver that there've been a lot of homes have received Energuide labels in the past few years, both pre and post retrofit labels. The homeowners have to apply to RateOurHome.ca to have their label displayed. So while this mechanism exists for people to do it, it's completely voluntary, relying on their goodwill, relying on their knowledge of the portal. So when I had checked it, there were only 6 on display within the city of Vancouver. So it's not, I don't think it's achieving what it could. Edmonton has attempted something similar, but Edmonton incentivized it. That program's out of money right now, but they were able to get 6,000 labels displayed because they were providing this incentive using their own program. So I don't know how it's performing since the incentive money ran out. But suffice to say, the voluntary system, the systems have been attempted. I'm not sure how much success they've truly had or how transformative they are at really moving the market. I'm not sure how much stock we should put in voluntary systems, but that's something we can all have a chat about. If you go to the next slide, please, Desi. We'll just talk about some of the benefits, some of the barriers to all of this. Obviously, the direct benefits are increased energy efficiency, at least we would hope. I mean, we have seen evidence to show, for example, within the European Union, there have been great improvements in energy efficiency attributable to energy labeling. There are, of course, other factors at play, as I stated, that are bringing these labels, increasing the performance of these homes and adding efficiency and high-performing technology to the homes. So the label itself doesn't achieve anything, but it drives this this movement towards more efficient homes. That results, of course, in reduced emissions. We know that there are property value increases. I guess in the world we're living in right now, where property values are extremely high, this isn't necessarily a benefit, depending on whether you own a home or not. But we'll put it there anyway. But the EU found a 2 to 6% increase in property value per letter grade improvement in energy label. And there is, of course, the job creation side, both for energy assessors. You need quite a few of those to move these programs along, and in the associated trades, especially insulators, HVAC, and others. Next slide, please, Desi. Indirect benefits is increased energy literacy, economic growth. There's both direct economic growth and indirect economic growth. This does help support other energy efficiency policies that municipalities or higher orders of government might have, as well as achieving our municipal greenhouse gas reduction commitments, also our federal and provincial ones. It does help provide transparency for the home buyer, because, you know, I guess the energy efficiency rating, while of course it talks to us about efficiency, it also talks to us about windows, doors, walls, HVAC systems. You know, these are all contributing into this letter grade. So we know if it's a letter grade. So the home buyer does get quite a lot of information from a very simple metric. And also home buyers, they may not understand how, you know, what is the life expectancy of a HVAC system, what is the life expectancy of a furnace or a heat pump or whatever else it's going to be. This does help drive them towards that understanding. And it's a lot easier for sellers to sell efficiency. Like we always hear about efficiency is this sort of hidden thing within the home and not typically valued by those who are buying or selling homes. Well, this really changes that. Next slide, please, Desi. Some of the barriers. Low homeowner interest. Again, the voluntary programs show us that without incentivizing, homeowners aren't going to be driving towards this in great numbers. This is just not something that is at the top of the mind. It is top of the mind probably for everyone on this call, people who do the work that we do, but I don't think we talk to our friends who are not in this area, not top of mind for everyone. It broad acceptance for multiple actors and, you know, realtors, others who need to be involved, can view this as something that is an additional barrier during the point of sale. Like we've enough hoops to jump through when trying to sell or purchase a home. This is adding another layer of complexity. There's privacy concerns. I mean, this is typically noted as a barrier, a perceived barrier. It's not really a real barrier, in my opinion anyway. I can't see it for any of the existing programs how privacy is affected by home energy scoring. Funding availability, these programs do require funding from higher orders of government, ideally. So both the will and the funding is required to move them forward. Capacity to deliver, they can often be outsourced by government. Governments don't all deliver these themselves. They can be privatized. I think the EU, for example, is pretty agnostic with regard to how. They don't really care if a government undertakes the program management themselves or if they outsource it to the third party. The Irish one is all third party. Low energy prices, that's another difference. Of course, we have to keep in mind whenever we start talking about programs in the European Union and other jurisdictions, they have considerably higher energy prices. I know we're in a time of volatile energy pricing right now. So are they. And the pricing, the changes that they've been exposed to over the past couple of years are so much greater than what we've been exposed to here. So in that world, to reduce your energy costs is so important to homeowners that these programs become a lot more desirable. And then uptake's a key barrier, especially for voluntary programs. Desi, I'm just wondering if there's anything in the chat. No, sorry, we're all good. Okay, so we'll talk about the consumer preference survey we created as part of this project. So this was a year and a half ago, so in June 2022. So, we'd often heard, oh, there's homeowner resistance to home energy labeling. So, we've heard that primarily from the realtor community who were not supporting it or were opposing it at different times, especially in Ontario, because we had this on the books. It was supposed to become a thing in Ontario as part of the Green Energy Act when that existed once upon a time. It never did. It was never enacted, the home energy labeling part of it all. And homeowner acceptance was often touted as a key reason why we didn't see this happen. So we wanted to find out from homeowners across Canada, what do they think of home energy labeling? So to do that, we had a third-party survey company survey over 1,000 Canadians. The survey was representative of age, gender, income, and province. So it was national and covered people of a number of ages, genders, and is corrected for income. So in the results, we're going to show there's actually very little difference based on any of these things. Like we might have thought, oh, perhaps people who are a lot younger will feel differently than people who are older, for example. And that wasn't really the case, as we'll see when we get into some of the data. So if Desi, you can go on there. And by the way, this data set, it's got really rich information in it, and we're okay to share this with our Clean Air Council partners if it's of use for you in your own decision making internally. But so we're just going to go through a bunch of the questions we asked just to show what we heard back, because I found this one of the most compelling parts of the whole study. Were the results that we got out of this. Anyway, how important is it to know if a home is energy efficient and the approximate operating costs of a home? So as you can see, almost 60% felt it was very important, and about 37% found it was moderately important. So we've basically got 95% of people now saying that it is either moderately or very important to know if a home is energy efficient and what the costs of operating that home are. I see Laurie has a question. The slides will be available. Yes, they will indeed. Next slide, please, Desi. And then, what do homeowners think of when they hear the term energy efficient home? And over 70%, this was multiple, they could pick as many as they wanted in this one. Lower energy consumption was about 75% of people. Energy efficient lighting, heating, AC, windows, doors was again over 70%. Lower utility bills around 70%. Better insulation over 60%. About half of people connected it to reducing emissions that cause climate change, and about 40% equated it to high build quality within the home. Next slide, please. Do you think that a home's price would be affected by requiring its sellers to disclose their energy rating? So about 89%, I think it was, said probably or definitely. So we didn't say positively or negatively, but positively, as in it will increase the price, was the thinking of energy disclosure. Less than 10% for probably not, less than 5% for definitely not, and around 5% for not sure. So yeah, overwhelmingly people felt that this would increase home pricing. Next slide, please, Desi. Would you be willing to get an energy assessment completed to determine your home's energy efficiency? So I thought this one came out really high. So again, we're not yet connecting any of this to renovations or anything like that, or to accessing incentives. We're not talking about greener homes. We're just asking, are you willing to get an energy assessment done to determine your energy efficiency? And so as you can see, about 80% said probably or definitely. So that was quite a compelling number of people we found right there. Just had interest in knowing their efficiency. Next slide gets into about willingness to pay, because of course, we can always state the preference for these sorts of audits and studies, but willingness to pay is another thing. About almost a third said nothing, 28% did not want to pay. About half felt less than 250. About 17-18% 250 to 500, and about 5% said more than 500. So accepting 500 is around the typical cost of these things, but often can be rebated through different programs. Only about 20% seemed willing to pay the current cost of EnerGuide audit in Ontario. Next slide, please, Desi. Then what is your preference for conducting home energy evaluations? And this is looking at different types of energy evaluations, because we had sort of envisioned a virtual audit type system, perhaps a more crude system that could then be backed up by a statistically significant sample of on the ground verification or something like that. We thought, might that be possible? But overwhelmingly, people wanted, well, overwhelmingly, what's that, 57% of people, they want an on-site evaluation by a certified energy advisor. And so that was an important learning for us, because we felt people, that number, I don't know why we thought this, but we thought that number, the 57-8%, would be people who just wanted to complete information themselves and get a relatively crude audit or score, rather, as a result of their own inputs using software. And as we can see, only about 15% of people stated that they would like to complete an online self-assessment by inputting utility bill and home information. 12% a virtual evaluation. So that's a sort of a combination of both of these, but you don't get an on-site person, but someone talks you through a self-assessment and adds other information on the back end as well. And then 10% were unsure, and 5% or so didn't want an energy rating at all.
Kevin, I will jump here, because also this
Yeah.
was one of the slide that also for me was, and you said it, we were surprised about this, and I was, and then my first initial thought was like, oh, maybe it was like the older generation, but then as you said in the beginning, there is no much difference. So yeah, for me, this was like a kind of like an interesting finding. And I think we do, people trust, I guess, other people rather than themselves in something that they're not that confident or something. But yeah,
Yeah, and if anyone is requesting the raw data, you can see the breakdown by province, gender, age, income. It's for nearly everything we're talking about, there's negligible difference in any group. So yeah, that was an interesting finding. Our on-site auditors are certainly doing something right, because there seems to be a lot of trust and faith in them across the country.
Right.
Yes, the next slide, please, Desi. Why do you want your home's efficiency evaluated? 2/3 of people want to know where they can save money on utility bills. About 40% stated environmental protection. Almost 40% want to increase the value of their homes. About 35% were looking for advice on upgrading their home's windows, doors, insulation, etc. Only 1 in 5 were saying it is required to access a government or utility incentive program. And again, this could be a factor of timing. I'm going to guess if we redid this survey today, it's going to come up with some different stuff in this particular section, especially given the greener homes requirements. And I'm just trying to think, 2 years ago, was that even running? Anyway, yeah, what was that? About 18% wanted to replace heating or AC equipment. So yeah, primarily it was to save money, environmental protection, so climate change, or to look at the value of the home. Next slide there, Desi, please. And then the type of information people wanted to obtain from a home energy assessment. So we looked at the different information available in different assessment types internationally, and we offered those up. And again, people want to know how energy is being lost in their homes. They want recommendations for savings. Those were the 2 highest ones. They also want to know how energy is being consumed, their annual energy consumption. You know, you'd think people would have a good sense of their annual energy consumption, but again, that really reflects a bias, I think, from those who work in our field. And I love to chat to just random people about this sort of thing, and I'm always interested to know how few people know anything about their energy consumption, or even want to know. They know roughly what it might cost, roughly, and only a real change in that cost would even get them to look at a bill at that level. Again, I'm just banging off my own anecdotes here. That's not based on evidence. The usefulness of the information on labels, again, you know, similarly, energy consumption per year is considered useful by over half the people. The breakdown of that energy consumption, also useful. A red to green color scale was found to be quite useful, or useful by over half people selected this. Number scale, a little less. Letter grade, a little less again, which also interesting. You know, I think our a priori assumption for this work was that letter grade, simple, people like it. You know, that would have come out stronger. It didn't. Environmental impact, the GHG per home, again, not as strongly selected here. Similar to the comparison to a typical new home, or access to more information. I would have assumed that, you know, who wouldn't like access to more information? But again, that's our own bias as people who work in this area. Next slide, please, Desi. And so with regard to tying energy label to the sale or lease, which we see in those other mandatory jurisdictions that we described. So about 3/4 would say definitely or probably, and then about 1/4 either probably not, definitely not, or not sure. So it does seem to be the time to do it. So we've got about 3/4 of our sample population saying definitely, or probably tie it to sale or lease changes in tenure. And with regard to timing, about 55% felt it should be upfront on the listing websites. About 40% felt it should be disclosed during a home visit, and a way smaller number at the time of an offer. Again, I thought during the home visit, I don't want to, because it's something that in my decision criteria, it will be right up there. I would have felt on the listing website was going to come out higher, and during the home visit quite a bit lower, because I've already made the commitment and gone to the home if I'm at the visit. And that information would have affected that decision for me, but clearly not for as many as we thought. Next slide, please, Desi. Excuse me. And then with regard to the premium that respondents were willing to pay for an energy efficient home, I think we're getting to the end of these shortly. About 20 to 25% felt they would not pay a premium for an energy efficient home. About 3% of people felt more than 10%. What's that? About 8% of people felt 5 to 10%. And then, in the mid 30s, 0 to 2 or 2 to 5. So they are willing to pay a premium, but that premium is, for 2/3 of people, it's less than 5%. But when you do consider, again, this factors back to probably to energy cost. We live in a very high value housing market, in our larger municipalities, especially across the country. And we do live in a housing market with quite low energy costs. So if it's up to 5% for 2/3 of people, but for homes that can be costing, $1 million, it's quite a bit of money in terms of the actual energy cost that's being reflected here. Next slide, please, Desi. And then, so yeah, that's just a snapshot of the survey results. Within the toolkit, then we get into considerations for program design for these programs. And so we talk quite a bit about eligibility, timing, the target audience, energy assessments and their availability, financing, how do these programs get financed, the use of labels, the importance of an assessor database. We also talk quite a bit about the administration of these programs and how they can be administered. There's software and IT requirements, risk mitigation strategies to drive demand for these programs. But I think a key conclusion that we were coming with from this was that mandatory programs are certainly have a greater market transformation ability. And those programs cannot just be a standalone label, end of story, and it's up to the homeowner to now, off you go, make your home better. There has to be the range of additional incentives, grants, whatever else it's going to be to drive the actual improvements the homeowners need to make. So again, it just really adds visibility to the invisible. Next slide there, Desi. So yeah, so as I said, the toolkit itself covers phases 1 and 2. Phases 3, 4, and 5 is what Desi's going to lead a little discussion next about what could come next or what should come next. Is there any sense in municipalities trying to go at this alone one by one? If we consider regions, especially in Southern Ontario here, and if we just looked at York region with so many municipalities within one region, if a homeowner moves from Newmarket to Markham, one has it, one does not. We're adding that confusion within the market. What is the best use of our time at Clean Air Partnership on all of this? Should we be advocating to the province or to the feds to create a system, a herd system for Ontario or for Canada? Should we be working with individual municipalities to try and implement programs? So I guess, Desi, back to you. And I think there's a link to the report. I think it was on the previous slide. And if there's any questions about the report itself, happy to take them. Or why don't we do that first, Jesse? If there's any questions about the report or the findings, open it up, and then we can get into this question, and you can take it away.
Yes, thanks so much, Kevin, for going through all the data. And I think it was kind of like confirm what you started with, that in your own like homeland, Ireland, and your family is using this as more like to see the value of their home and to improve the value of the home. And I think it was like kind of like the data was showing that the interest is more about the cost of the like reducing cost of utility bills and etc. And it's like a little bit down the road the climate implications, but that's the, as you said, that's the reality, and the folks that represent the representation of the people and a regular resident. We are opening for question, and we have time for discussion, and we would like to actually have a discussion. I can start unmuting you all, or you can just raise your hand if you have any comments and question, starting with Jeremy. Hi, Jeremy. I think you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just did. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Jeremy Shambury, Region Appeal, and thanks for that, Kevin. It's been a while. Good to see you.
Yeah.
I got a lot of questions, and maybe I might connect a few offline about this. I really do think it's a key way for us to make inroads on mitigation in existing building stock. But one of the things I heard you mention a few times, and even Desi just mentioned it there at the end, is one of the key drivers is that that's motivating a lot of people would be that the price of their homes would go up. And I know, as you can appreciate, in the current environment, that can be taken in different ways by different policymakers and decision makers in municipalities on whether they're standing behind something that's going to impact housing affordability. I can appreciate, I would probably position it saying that, well, but you're going to save money on the back end with energy, and maybe you won't be as like that energy poverty won't be as big of a presence, but I still have that initial purchase. Sometimes the operation and maintenance of things don't get quite the same attention as the upfront capital. Have you guys given that any thought, or how you would maybe position that, given the important focus that we're putting on housing affordability?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I noticed it and I had it in the benefits section, it came straight to me, and it is something we have been thinking about, Jeremy, not just with regard to labeling itself, but overall with regard to, I mean, any home that goes through the Greener Homes program, you could say it's decreasing affordability for potential new homeowners while saving money perhaps for the existing homeowner. And you know, we don't have to deal with that side of it as much, obviously, on our side as you do, and your decision makers will. And I don't know how we position it. I really don't. I mean, do we simply stop talking about the fact that there's evidence that shows these things go up? But the reality is they do increase the price of homes, and we're not getting away from that. I think one consideration, though, is that the studies on increasing the price of homes are from the European Union. And the price of homes in the European Union is considerably less than the price of homes in the part of the world we're sitting in right now. Now, I'm in the GTA. That's not really an apples to apples comparison, right? Because the EU is Paris, it's Dublin, but it's also rural areas, smaller municipalities, from Bulgaria, where Desi's from, all the way up to Sweden. So I don't know within the large municipal context what those figures are like, but it's a discussion that, yeah, we do need to have, not just, I think, about herd, but about improving building stock generally. It does result in increased home values, and we're not getting away from it. I don't know. I mean, What are your thoughts, like with regard to your own discussions at Peel? How are you thinking of approaching it?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I would think part of my positioning would be that the fact that it's an investment in future savings for the homeowner versus the homeowner paying a lot of money for marble counters
Yeah.
and then also not getting any long-term savings. So like that would be one of my key things. But yeah, I don't I don't have a great response. It's kind of what you're. I don't know if we don't over advertise the fact that it's would drive up the price, because that also is for the seller a key reason why they would want to participate. And I'm even thinking
Yeah.
even in new development, like I do think that it might be even easier to get the labeling occurring in new developments before, and then maybe start a bit of a demand in existing building
Mm,
stock when shoppers are comparing a new construction versus an existing and are asking homeowners, well, what's your rating? Um, but still, so maybe but part of the pitch, just like you said, if I'm a developer, okay, if you're telling me I can sell my home at a greater profit because I did the right thing, and
yeah.
you're gonna praise me and give me recognition for doing that through this labeling, okay, we can talk. But if
Yeah.
you're telling me to sell at the same price, I'm not as interested.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting point. And you know, a broader consideration as well, though, is that if we're talking about a 2 to 6% increase in home value per letter grade increase using the label, well, the label hasn't done anything to change the value. It was the work that was done to the home to get you the letter grade increase. And if that's 2 to 6%, doing nothing to your home in this region has resulted in increases of 10 to 20% per year for I don't know how long, just sitting on it. So you could argue that this is a one hitter to improve the home for generations, where annually, by doing nothing, this is just getting washed out. Um, but of course, we'd have to look at some numbers, but there's no doubt. Yeah, I mean, it's a discussion worth having for sure.
Thanks, Jeremy, for jumping in on this. And as Kevin said, it is discussion, and we would like to hear there's no like right or wrong here. We just want to know what is your thinking in your municipality, and is it a municipal role? And I think we kind of like hinted it, and Kevin said it as well. Like in the examples that we have are not really a municipal. It's like either on the regional level or even like our support as a CAP to do an advocacy for the province or for a federal program. But again, we want to hear from you, even if such a thing is it now a good time? Is there any interest in your municipalities? Niall, Niall, I hope you're here. I want to hear from like Durham region. Is there any like talk there?
Yeah, hi Desi.
Hi.
This is Niall Halim speaking, Durham Region. I'm the policy advisor on the sustainability team. Yeah, I haven't been intimately involved with our programs. So our Durham Greener Homes program, it provides single-family homeowners with an energy retrofit concierge service. We did apply to NRCan to seek additional funding to implement a scaling virtual audit technology program on top of Durham Greener Homes. And so the idea is that using this virtual audit technology and leveraging AI, we'd be able to generate a home energy rating for homes within Durham region. And it's specifically designed to support First Nations communities where it might be cost prohibitive to undertake a physical energy audit. So our folks over at Windfall Ecology Center, they've been helping us support this program. They'd be able to provide more details on it. I haven't been, again, intimately involved with this. And so, yeah, that's where our head is at, virtual audit technology to support home energy labeling. I believe we're hoping to roll out the program over the next later Q2 or Q3 of this year. But yeah, again, thanks, Kevin, for that excellent presentation. I do think this is the future in terms of helping support energy literacy, and then also helping transform the industry, because yeah, there's a lot of transformative change that needs to happen across the ecosystem, contractors, energy advisors, and so on. So yeah, sorry, very high level update, but again, I think I defer to my Windfall colleagues. They might actually be on the call here.
I do see Brent is
Okay.
on. If you're able, Brent, you've got an awful lot of experience, more than probably anyone here in the world of in-person and remote auditing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm happy to chime in. I guess from my perspective, I mean, you know, here in Ontario, we've witnessed, you know, as you brought up the Green Energy Act and the enabling legislation for mandatory labeling that was in that act, which never came to fruition because the previous government actually 3 times tried to implement a mandatory labeling program, and each time chickened out because of the pushback from the real estate sector. Not from homeowners, but from the real estate sector. And there were, you know, several arguments that the sector had. One was cost, and doing an energy audit, an in-person energy audit, would impact the cost of a home purchase. Today, that seems pretty ridiculous when you know, when a pre and post audit is $600 to $700, and the average price of a house is close to $1 million. It doesn't seem all that relevant. But there was a more forceful argument, and that argument was there just was not capacity in the province to keep up with doing energy audits to meet the time of sale requirement that was being proposed by the government at that time. It just wasn't feasibly possible. So this is where I think that the virtual audit has a role to play. It eliminates the major barrier that the real estate industry was putting up with respect to doing auditing. And with the virtual audit technology today, we can provide instantly a very accurate energy and emissions label. So I think this is the way forward for remote communities, and we're working, Niall mentioned, we're also working with some Indigenous communities to roll out this technology. But it works in a city environment, any size city environment, and it can be rolled out quite inexpensively, provides an accurate label. And that's not to say it displaces an on-site energy audit, because it really doesn't. What we can do with the machine learning technology and the large EnerGuide data sets that, you know, that are used to create these virtual labels is we produce an accurate label, but that's all it is. It's identifying the energy consumption and the emissions the same way a label on an automobile or any other appliance would have an EnerGuide label. But when it comes to actually doing a home retrofit, you need an on-site energy auditor. A virtual label doesn't replace that. So the other way that the virtual label is useful is as an education and awareness tool, because it draws homeowners into a discussion about their home and their home energy, and is a great precursor to doing an on-site EnerGuide audit. I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Brent. And so, is your system, the virtual system, is it something that you'd be able to present to the Clean Air Council at some point soon, or where is it at?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Niall said, this program is going to be rolling out. Looks like it's going to be rolling out in April. We have already developed the labels for all 200,000 Part 9 homes in the Durham region. And we'll be doing a marketing campaign, and each household will be contacted, and they will be able to claim their label by enrolling in the Durham Greener Homes program. When they enroll in the program, they are provisioned with their own personal portal, and they're able to go to the portal, claim their label, and we've developed a new very friendly user interface. They'll be able to see their label, do some basic modeling, model a fuel switch or model upgrading insulation, and instantly get a reevaluation of their energy label through the virtual audit API, and then they're able to book a visit with one of our energy coaches. And the first thing the energy coach will do, just about, if the client hasn't got an EnerGuide audit, we'll suggest that they do that, because the virtual audit can't tell you. It can make a recommendation that if you upgrade your attic insulation, you will lower your emissions and lower your energy costs, but it can't tell you what's in the attic already. And even if there's room to add insulation in your attic, it can't tell you what your air exchanges are. So that's where the blower door test of an on-site energy audit comes in. So, and it can't tell you, for instance, if there was asbestos in your attic. So there's 101 reasons why you would want to do an on-site energy audit. But a good starting point is the virtual audit. It tells you what your energy usage is and your emissions, and it's just a great way to start and a great way to engage.
Oh, excellent. Well, we look forward to hearing more about it as it starts to roll out. Very exciting.
Yeah, I'll be reaching out to you, Brent, and thanks so much for kind of like speaking about this. We are at the end of our webinar and meeting. The question is open of like how we can support you, if now it's the time, and maybe now it's the time for just like discussions like this one. So just keep us in mind if you have any additional thoughts. We would like to see this moving forward, but let's continue the conversation first. With this, we are closing our webinar. Thanks so much, Kevin, for presenting our report. Thanks everyone who joined us and who participated. And stay tuned for more of our upcoming webinars and workshops. And enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks, Tessie. Thank you, everybody. Have a good
Bye
day.
from us.